13-year-old Emma tightened her grip on the armrest of the airplane seat as the hum of the engines filled the cabin. It was her first long-haul flight from New York to London, and while excitement bubbled inside her, there was a faint thread of nerves too. The airport had been a blur of movement suitcases rolling, parents barking last-minute instructions, security checks, and a million strangers bustling past, but stepping onto the plane brought a strange calm. She had her headphones, a thick travel blanket, and a small notebook filled with doodles and little facts she liked to memorize. Her parents, both professionals in demanding careers, had tried to make the journey feel as ordinary as possible. Her father, tall and sharply dressed, whispered a reminder about keeping her seatbelt fastened. Her mother, eyes always scanning the cabin, reminded her to drink water and stay comfortable. "It's just a plane ride, Em. Nothing to worry about," her father said, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. Emma nodded, forcing a small smile, but the truth was, she was already noticing things others ignored. The slight wobble in the jet bridge, the way the engines thrummed slightly differently when they taxied, the glint of sunlight on the wings. The cabin crew moved with practiced efficiency. Flight attendants with crisp uniforms passed through, checking overhead bins, assisting passengers, and offering reassuring smiles. Their calmness was contagious, and for a moment, Emma let herself sink into the rhythm of the plane. She pulled the window shade down partially, allowing only a sliver of daylight to filter in. Clouds stretched endlessly below, like a sea of cotton, and the thought made her stomach flutter with a mix of awe and unease. Emma tried to nap, tucking her notebook under her chin and letting the hum of the engines lull her. Around her, passengers were doing the same, reading books, scrolling through phones, whispering to travel companions. Children squirmed and asked endless questions, their parents responding with patient but tired nods. Emma's own parents reclined slightly, seemingly relaxed, though subtle tension threaded through their posture. Despite her efforts, sleep didn't come easily. Something about the hum of the engines felt different, more alert, more deliberate than usual. Emma's eyes snapped open every few minutes, scanning the cabin with quiet curiosity. She noticed the subtle ways the plane flexed during taxi, the micro-adjustments in the wings, even the rhythm of the engine hum. Most of it was perfectly normal. She knew she had read enough books on aviation and watched countless videos on plane mechanics to know that, but a small voice inside her whispered that today nothing would be entirely ordinary. She watched as a flight attendant moved toward the cockpit, a clipboard in hand, and then paused, glancing over the cabin with a slightly furrowed brow before continuing. Emma tilted her head, curiosity sharpening. The captain and co-pilot were barely visible through the cockpit door's tiny window, their faces serious, focused. Something about the way they moved, subtle but deliberate, sent a flicker of alert through her mind. She frowned slightly, shaking it off. Perhaps she was just overthinking. Minutes ticked by, and the plane began its slow ascent. The hum shifted slightly, a deeper vibration resonating through the cabin as the landing gear retracted. Emma clutched the armrest, fascinated by the mechanics she had only ever seen in videos. Her father leaned over to whisper a quick joke about the view from above, making her laugh softly. For a moment, the flight felt perfectly normal, peaceful, even as the city below shrank into a mosaic of tiny lights and shapes. But then, mid-ascent, a minor turbulence shudder passed through the plane. Drinks rattled in their cups, a few passengers gasped, and the cabin lights flickered faintly. Flight attendants steadied themselves with calm efficiency, offering reassurances. Nothing to worry about, folks. Just a small bump. Emma, however, noticed something subtle, a small, almost imperceptible blinking on one of the cockpit panels, a light she had read about in manuals used for caution alerts. Her mind raced, piecing together information she had accumulated over years of fascination. Flight simulators, aviation manuals, videos on military planes, all of it seemed suddenly relevant. She leaned slightly in her seat, observing without drawing attention. The plane continued to rise, clouds shifting beneath them, but her curiosity now felt like an obligation. Something about today demanded attention, even if she didn't yet understand why. Around her, passengers began to relax again, trusting the calm professionalism of the crew. Emma's mother adjusted her scarf and offered a reassuring smile, thinking Emma was still dozing, but the girl's eyes remained open, sharp, and alert. Her father, oblivious to her internal calculations, dozed lightly, lulled by the gentle vibration of the engines. Only Emma seemed to notice the subtle tension in the air, the slight hesitation in the captain's posture, and the rhythm of the co-pilot's hand movements across the controls. The first hour passed in a mix of ordinary in-flight routines, snacks, soft drinks, reading, and the occasional glance out the window, but Emma remained quietly watchful. Her mind catalogued every detail: the sound of air moving over the fuselage, the patterns of cloud shadows, the shifting of weight in the cabin. Each tiny anomaly she noticed layered together, forming a quiet sense that the flight was not simply a journey across the Atlantic. By the time the captain made the standard, "You may now move about the cabin" announcement, Emma had already pieced together several small clues. She didn't yet know what would happen next, but instinctively, she felt that her attention might soon be needed in a way no one on the plane could anticipate. As passengers began to stretch and children fidgeted in excitement, Emma leaned back slightly, notebook in hand, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. She couldn't explain why, but the feeling in her chest was unmistakable. Today, something unusual was unfolding at 30,000 feet, and she would not be a mere bystander. The hum of the engines was no longer just white noise. It was the background to a story that was about to begin, one in which a 13-year-old girl would find herself at the center of an extraordinary moment in the skies. The plane had reached cruising altitude, and the initial excitement of takeoff had worn off. Passengers settled into routines, headphones on, books open, some quietly dozing. Emma, however, remained alert, her eyes scanning every corner of the cabin, every movement of the crew. Her small notebook lay open on her lap, filled with sketches of jet wings, diagrams of cockpit panels, and notes about flight mechanics. She traced the lines of the pages absent-mindedly, her mind half distracted by the familiar rhythm of the engines, half absorbed in observation. Something about the flight felt off. At first, it was subtle, a slight wobble in the wings, a soft vibration that lingered a moment too long. Then the plane dipped slightly, a ripple through the cabin that sent the occasional cup rattling. Passengers murmured, glancing at one another uneasily. The flight attendants, ever professional, glided down the aisles, offering calm reassurances. "Just a minor turbulence, folks. Nothing to worry about." But their smiles, though practiced, were not entirely convincing. Emma noticed it, the tiniest tension in their shoulders, the careful placement of hands on seatbacks, the glances toward the cockpit door that lingered just a second too long. She leaned slightly forward, pressing her lips together. Her mind began running through possibilities. Could it be a sudden storm? A minor air pocket? Or something else, something unusual that wasn't reflected in the weather reports? Her pulse quickened with anticipation. Years of flight simulation games had trained her to notice patterns in engine hums, wing flecks, and minor shifts in altitude. Every subtle vibration in the fuselage, every flicker of light on the control panels, her mind catalogued and analyzed them. Most passengers were oblivious, lost in movies, magazines, or small talk. But Emma had begun to see the flight in a new way, a puzzle that demanded attention. The turbulence passed, but only briefly. The plane's engines shifted tone, a subtle but perceptible change in vibration. Emma frowned. A blinking light appeared on a small panel near the cockpit door read, "Intermittent." Her pulse quickened. She remembered reading about such signals in aviation guides. Though often routine, they could indicate caution or anomaly. Her father, oblivious in his seat, leaned back and closed his eyes, letting the cabin lull him. Her mother adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, smiling at Emma. "Relax, honey. It's just a plane." Emma gave a slight nod, but inwardly she could not. From her vantage point near the window, Emma noticed a flight attendant pausing near the cockpit, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowing slightly. She resumed her walk after a brief hesitation, but Emma's curiosity was now fully awakened. Something was different in the cockpit today. The captain and co-pilot had not changed their expressions visibly, but Emma had read enough about aviation procedures to know when someone was quietly tense. Something in their posture, subtle yet deliberate, hinted at concern. Minutes later, a second, more pronounced jolt passed through the cabin. Drinks trembled in trays. A child whimpered in the seat ahead, and murmurs rippled through passengers. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but clipped. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered a small turbulence area. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." His tone was professional, but to Emma, it carried a faint edge of urgency. She bent over her notebook, sketching small notes and observations. The vibration, the engine pitch, the blinking lights, she connected them silently, her young mind racing. Outside, clouds moved in slow, shapeless waves, but Emma imagined trajectories, altitudes, and the way air currents might affect their path. She realized she was seeing something most adults overlooked, subtle signals that something unusual was unfolding at 30,000 feet. A flight attendant passed by, offering drinks. She glanced at Emma, her eyes flicking briefly to the notebook. "You're paying attention, huh?" she whispered with a small smile. Emma nodded, then quickly returned her focus to the cabin. She felt a strange mixture of excitement and tension. This flight, which had begun as ordinary, had changed. There was an invisible thread of anticipation running through the cabin unnoticed by most, yet palpable to those who were observing carefully. As Emma studied the small red blinking light, she noticed the captain's hands moving across the controls with a subtle urgency. Not panic exactly, but precise, calculated movements. He was communicating with someone over the radio's short, clipped commands. Emma listened closely to the faint buzz of the intercom as other passengers focused on their screens or books. Something was happening in the world outside the cabin, something that demanded attention, and Emma could sense it. The plane shuddered again, this time slightly stronger. Drinks rattled more forcefully, and some passengers gasped. Emma's father sat upright, concern flashing in his eyes. Her mother whispered to another passenger, "It's just turbulence." But Emma was no longer watching them. Her eyes were fixed on the cockpit window and the small screen embedded in the bulkhead. She had memorized panel layouts, understood engine indicators, and even simulated emergency responses in games countless times. Her mind worked quickly, anticipating what might happen next. She observed the flight attendants moving toward the galley, sharing whispered words, and returning to their posts with a little more caution than before. The subtle tension in the cabin was growing, yet most passengers remained unaware of what she was noticing. Emma, however, had already made a mental checklist of anomalies: engine vibrations, light signals, pilot posture, cabin reactions. She realized that if a real emergency occurred, she might be able to help. Her knowledge, though unconventional, could matter. As the plane leveled out briefly, Emma allowed herself a quiet breath. She had noticed patterns forming. Minor turbulence, unusual signals, the captain's focused demeanor. It all connected in her mind like pieces of a puzzle she had been trained to solve. Her pulse had quickened, but her fear was tempered by curiosity and a sense of readiness. This was no longer just a long flight. It was a live scenario, one that demanded observation, patience, and clarity of thought. Then, without warning, the captain's voice came over the intercom again. This time, it was different, more direct, sharper. "Is there a fighter pilot on board?" The words sent a ripple through the cabin. Passengers froze. Some looked around, bewildered. Children clung to parents, eyes wide. Emma's heart pounded, but she felt a surge of focus. The moment she had been anticipating had arrived. The ordinary flight she had been observing, analyzing, had now shifted into the extraordinary. Passengers whispered nervously. Some laughed nervously at what they thought was a strange announcement. Flight attendants exchanged tense glances. Her parents gripped her hands instinctively, eyes wide with fear. Emma, however, sat upright, calm and alert, her mind racing. She scanned the cabin, thinking through what she had learned in simulations, books, and countless videos. Her knowledge was about to be tested in a way she had never imagined. The subtle tremors of the plane, the unusual cockpit signals, the patterns of pilot movements, all converged in that instant. Emma realized that she was no longer a passive passenger. She was an observer in a high-stakes situation, one that might require her unexpected input. The calmness she had felt at the start of the journey had given way to readiness, anticipation, and quiet determination. She was ready to step forward. The flight, which had begun as an ordinary adventure across the Atlantic, was now poised on the edge of an extraordinary event. And at 13 years old, Emma's awareness, curiosity, and courage were about to make her an unlikely participant in the unfolding drama high above the clouds. The cabin fell into an uneasy silence. The words still echoed in Emma's ears. "Is there a fighter pilot on board?" It wasn't the usual safety instruction, not the scripted reassurance passengers expected. The moment carried weight. Adults whispered urgently to one another, children squirmed nervously, and flight attendants exchanged glances that flickered between concern and disbelief. Emma's pulse quickened, but unlike the others, she didn't feel panic. Instead, a strange calm focus settled over her. Something told her this was no ordinary emergency, and that her own awareness might matter in the moments ahead. Her father instinctively leaned forward, his hand resting protectively over hers. "Did he just say what I think he said?" he whispered, voice tense. Her mother, eyes wide, glanced nervously at the flight attendants, then back to the cockpit. Emma, however, sat upright, fully awake now. The hum of the engines no longer seemed ordinary. Every vibration, every flicker of light, every movement from the cockpit felt magnified. Her mind, trained through simulations and 1,000 hours of reading about aviation, instantly began analyzing possibilities. The captain's voice came again, calm but firm, reverberating over the intercom. "If there is a fighter pilot on board, please make yourself known immediately." There was a slight pause, then a lower, clipped set of tones, the radio signals to air traffic control. Direct and urgent. Emma noticed the tension in the pilots' movements as they monitored their instruments. Their calm professionalism hid urgency, but she could sense it. The subtle shift in tone, the barely perceptible change in posture, all indicated that the situation was escalating. Passengers murmured nervously. "What's going on?" A woman asked her husband, voice trembling. "Is it a hijack?" whispered a man across the aisle. Children stared wide-eyed at their parents, unsure if they should cry. Flight attendants tried to maintain calm, walking slowly up and down the aisles, offering reassuring smiles that were just a fraction too forced. Emma, meanwhile, observed everything with careful precision. The shiver of tension in the cabin, the minor flicker in the monitors near the cockpit, the cadence of the captain's clipped commands over the radio. Something was happening outside the plane, something dangerous, and it was being handled quietly, but decisively by professionals trained for emergencies. Her gaze shifted to the cockpit window. The co-pilot's fingers danced across the controls with precise efficiency, eyes darting to the radar and instruments. Emma's mind raced, connecting all the tiny details she had been cataloging during the flight. She thought about the minor turbulence earlier, the flickering lights, the subtle shifts in engine hum. The pieces were aligning. Her pulse thumped, not from fear, but from a sudden realization she might actually be able to help. The flight attendant nearest to Emma noticed her unusual calm. Kneeling slightly, she whispered cautiously, You look like you know something. Do you? Are you a pilot?" Emma shook her head slowly. "No, but I've studied planes. I know about controls, fighter jets, emergency maneuvers, simulations." The attendant hesitated, then nodded, relaying the information to the cockpit via headset. A few moments later, Emma caught sight of the captain's eyes glancing toward the cabin door. His expression softened fractionally, as if weighing the unusual possibility. Could this girl actually be of help? Meanwhile, the other passengers reacted with confusion, fear, and disbelief. A man muttered under his breath, "Is this for real? A child?" Another passenger clutched her armrest, whispering to a friend, "What does a fighter pilot even do on a plane like this?" Children pressed against their parents, staring at Emma curiously, sensing her unusual calm. Parents' eyes darted between the cockpit and their daughter, uncertainty and awe flickering in equal measure. Emma herself focused entirely on what she could see: subtle indicators, flashing lights, slight variations in engine tone. She had memorized the sequence of lights and their meanings from hours of study. She noticed the co-pilot glancing at the altimeter more frequently than expected, the radar screen showing faint, unusual blips that most passengers wouldn't even perceive. Something was approaching something that required immediate attention, and the captain had called for a fighter pilot because split-second decisions were critical. The plane shook slightly again. It was nothing like turbulence, Emma realized. This was deliberate, controlled, and external. Her mind flashed scenarios she had studied: intercepts, evasive maneuvers, split-second responses to unknown aircraft. She mentally mapped trajectories, predicted angles, and noted the tiniest clues in the radar. The thought occurred to her: if she could communicate this knowledge calmly, the pilots might have an advantage. Her training, even if only virtual and theoretical, was about to be tested in the real world. Another flight attendant passed by, eyeing her suspiciously. Emma held her gaze steady, unclenching her notebook just enough to jot down a few notes, mapping the subtle changes she observed. The cabin was tense. Passengers whispered in confusion, some giggling nervously at the strange situation, others gripping armrests in outright fear. Yet Emma felt a quiet clarity amidst the chaos. Her heartbeat was steady. Her mind worked faster than the adults around her. She was aware of the unusual calm that came only with intense focus, a clarity that came from preparation and observation. Then came the next subtle warning, a new set of radar blips, moving closer, faster than the plane itself. Emma's stomach tightened, not from fear, but from recognition. She understood the trajectory, the potential outcome, and the critical need for precise maneuvering. The captain's voice came over the intercom once more, calm, clipped, and authoritative. "We are monitoring an unidentified aircraft. I repeat, any trained personnel on board, please come forward." The words hung in the air, heavy with urgency. Emma's parents gripped her hands instinctively, eyes wide with concern and awe. Around her, passengers whispered frantically, some scoffing, some terrified. Emma's gaze remained fixed, her mind mapping every potential action the pilots could take. She had seen these patterns in simulations, understood the risks, and knew she could contribute, if only she had the chance. And when the flight attendant returned, hesitant but decisive, she nodded toward Emma. "I think this girl can help," she said softly. Emma felt a shiver of anticipation, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She hadn't expected her first transatlantic flight to turn into anything extraordinary. Yet here it was, the start of a real high-stakes situation, where lives depended on calm reasoning, observation, and knowledge. She took a deep breath, preparing herself for the moment she would step forward, ready to offer guidance in a scenario she had only ever imagined in her simulations. For the first time, she realized the gravity of the moment. A 13-year-old girl, thousands of feet above the Atlantic, might play a role in navigating one of the most unusual emergencies of her life. The ordinary world of seatbacks, snacks, and clouds had vanished, replaced by high-stakes reality. Every detail she had observed since boarding, the subtle vibrations, the blinking lights, the captain's measured movements, had led to this instant. Emma's journey was about to take a dramatic turn, one that would test her courage, knowledge, and composure in ways no simulation ever could. And above all, Emma understood one undeniable truth. She could not hesitate. The hum of the engines no longer felt comforting. It was a constant reminder that the plane was airborne, fragile, and under scrutiny. Emma's eyes were fixed on the cockpit, her mind analyzing every flicker of the instruments, every movement the captain and co-pilot made. She had watched them now for several minutes, noting the subtle tension in their shoulders, the way their eyes darted between the radar screen and the altimeter. Something was approaching an unknown aircraft, moving with precision and speed that was anything but casual. The flight attendants had begun to sense it too. The subtle unease she had observed earlier was now visible in their posture. They moved more deliberately, hands brushing seatbacks for stability, eyes scanning the cabin, and occasionally peeking toward the cockpit. Passengers whispered nervously, some speculating about storms or mechanical issues. A few glanced at Emma, noting her calm demeanor and the notebook she clutched, as if she were quietly cataloging the entire situation. Unbeknownst to most, she was. The plane shuddered again, slightly more pronounced this time. Drinks sloshed in cups. A small child cried, and murmurs of confusion and fear filled the cabin. Emma noticed something subtle on the radar, a faint blip moving steadily toward their path. It wasn't a storm. It wasn't turbulence. It was deliberate, fast, and tracking their plane with unnerving accuracy. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from recognition. She had studied intercepts and evasive maneuvers in simulations, memorized the speeds and flight patterns of jets. And now, thousands of feet above the Atlantic, the theory was real. Unidentified aircraft approaching. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but authoritative. Maintain course. Any trained personnel on board, your assistance may be required. Panic rippled through the cabin. Parents clutched their children, whispered anxiously to strangers, and flight attendants tried to mask their concern behind professional smiles. Emma, however, leaned forward in her seat, scanning her notebook, recalling every maneuver she had practiced virtually. This was no longer an exercise. This was real. Her father grabbed her hand instinctively. "Emma, stay calm, okay?" he said, eyes wide with concern. Emma nodded, but her focus was elsewhere. Every subtle vibration of the plane, every flicker on the instrument panels, every micro-adjustment the pilots made, she cataloged them in her mind. Her thoughts moved faster than reality itself. The unknown aircraft was closing the distance. Time was measured in heartbeats, each one stretching with intensity. The co-pilot's movements became more deliberate. Fingers glided across switches, knobs, and monitors, adjusting the plane's heading, speed, and altitude in response to the faint blips on radar. Emma recognized patterns she had seen in military flight simulations. Small, deliberate shifts designed to maintain stability while assessing the approaching threat. Her mind calculated trajectories, possible intercept points, and evasive angles. She could almost anticipate the plane's next movements. A flight attendant approached Emma quietly. "You're calm? More than anyone else here. You understand planes, don't you?" she whispered. Emma nodded slowly. "I know about maneuvers, fighter jets, simulation strategies. I can help if they let me." The attendant hesitated, then gave a small nod and walked toward the cockpit, relaying the information. Emma's pulse accelerated with anticipation. Her knowledge, once confined to games and books, might now guide professionals in a real-life situation. Passengers continued to murmur and fidget. Some tried to peek at the cockpit monitors, while others buried themselves in blankets or closed their eyes, hoping the situation would resolve itself. Yet Emma's mind remained razor-sharp. She analyzed every variable: altitude, speed, wind currents, and the angle of approach of the unknown aircraft. Each observation was critical. Each detail could make a difference. The subtle tension that had been building since takeoff now crystallized into an unmistakable sense of impending danger. The plane shuddered once more, this time stronger. Emma's stomach lurched. The pilots were responding to something external, something invisible to the passengers. She realized with a jolt that this was no routine scenario. The unknown aircraft was actively tracking them, testing reactions, measuring their flight path. Emma's mind raced. She mentally ran through evasive strategies she had memorized: altitude changes, minor directional adjustments, speed variations, all calculated to avoid detection or collision. She noted which maneuvers could be applied safely to a commercial aircraft without alarming passengers. Her mother leaned close, whispering, "What's happening, Emma?" She squeezed her hand tightly. Emma met her gaze, her voice calm despite the storm inside her mind. "Something's approaching. They're testing the plane, or tracking it. I think I can help." Her mother's eyes widened, a mix of fear and awe. Emma's father glanced toward the cockpit, uncertainty clouding his expression. But the flight attendants nodded slightly, indicating that Emma's knowledge might indeed be useful. The captain's voice came again over the intercom. "All passengers, remain calm. Flight crew will handle the situation." There was no mistaking the urgency behind the words, subtle though it was. Emma's mind connected the dots instantly. The captain was following protocol, buying time and maintaining composure for the cabin. But he needed insight, an extra set of eyes trained on specific patterns, someone who could notice the subtle shifts in trajectory and anticipate movements. Emma was ready. She leaned forward, notebook in hand, eyes scanning the cabin and instruments. Her pulse steadied, her mind clear. This was the moment she had been unconsciously preparing for. The unknown aircraft continued to approach, its intentions unclear. The pilots adjusted course slightly, a micro-correction testing reactions. Emma recognized the patterns from simulations, minor maneuvers designed to gauge the plane's stability. She took a deep breath, preparing to offer guidance. Minutes stretched. Each second felt like an eternity. The plane's engines thrummed, the cabin lights flickered faintly, and passengers whispered in fear and curiosity. Emma focused entirely on the cockpit, noting every subtle cue, the slight flicker of a warning light, the co-pilot's measured adjustments, the way the captain scanned radar screens. She calculated possible responses, strategies that could maintain safety without alarming the passengers. She was ready to step forward when called. The situation outside remained uncertain. Emma could not see the approaching aircraft directly, only the radar blips and subtle cockpit signals. Yet her mind worked in patterns she had memorized from countless simulations. She understood the angles, the speeds, and the reactions necessary to maintain control. The unknown threat was precise, deliberate, and potentially dangerous. And now, Emma, the 13-year-old girl who had napped innocently at the start of the flight, was fully awake, mentally prepared to contribute to the resolution. A deep calm settled over her. While passengers panicked quietly, while flight attendants remained vigilant and professional, Emma's mind ran through every possibility. She mapped potential maneuvers, anticipated the next radar blips, and calculated the safest course for the plane. The ordinary journey had transformed into a high-stakes scenario, testing courage, knowledge, and composure in ways no simulator had ever matched. Above the clouds, with the Atlantic stretching endlessly beneath, the flight entered its most critical phase. Emma, fully awake, fully focused, understood one thing with certainty. She could make a difference. And the next moments would prove whether her knowledge, calmness, and courage were enough to guide the plane safely through danger. Emma's pulse was steady now. Her mind focused on the cockpit, the radar, and the subtle shifts she had been observing for the past hour. The unknown aircraft continued to approach, its intentions hidden, but the pattern was familiar to her from countless hours of simulations and aviation guides. This was no longer just a flight. It was a live scenario demanding intelligence, composure, and quick thinking. A flight attendant, sensing Emma's calm, moved toward the cockpit door with quiet urgency. She whispered, "This girl, she knows what she's doing. She can help." Emma's heart raced with anticipation. She nodded, clutching her notebook tightly. The attendant knocked lightly on the cockpit door, then gestured toward Emma. The captain glanced up, eyes narrowing slightly, assessing. After a brief pause, he nodded subtly, signaling permission. This was it, the moment Emma had subconsciously prepared for since takeoff. Emma rose from her seat, feeling the weight of the cabin's collective anxiety press upon her. Passengers whispered nervously, some in disbelief, as a 13-year-old girl moved toward the cockpit. Her parents followed cautiously, eyes wide with concern and awe. Emma's small hands gripped the edge of the cockpit console lightly, eyes scanning the array of instruments and monitors. The hum of the engines felt louder now, the vibration of the fuselage sharper, as if the plane itself understood the gravity of the moment. "Can you explain your experience?" the captain asked, voice calm but edged with curiosity. Emma nodded. "I've studied aviation extensively. I know about fighter jets, simulations, and emergency maneuvers. I can help you anticipate the other aircraft's movements." The co-pilot raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. The captain studied her for a long moment and gestured toward the monitors. "All right, tell us what you see." Emma leaned slightly, eyes narrowing as she scanned the radar and instruments. "The aircraft approaching us. It's tracking our flight path carefully. It's not random. If we maintain our current altitude, it will intersect with our trajectory in less than 3 minutes." She pointed to the radar blip. "If you adjust the plane's slightly altitude up by 20 feet and a minor course correction to the right, you can create a buffer zone and test its behavior. It will give us more reaction time." The co-pilot exchanged a glance with the captain. A micro smile appeared on the captain's lips in acknowledgement of Emma's insight. "All right," he said, his fingers moving across the controls, adjusting course and altitude slightly. "Keep monitoring." Emma's eyes never left the radar. "It's following your response, testing reactions. Maintain steady speed and minimal bank. Don't make abrupt changes. That will prevent any detection or unnecessary alarm." Seconds stretched. The plane's engines hummed steadily as the pilots executed her suggested adjustments. Emma's mind calculated, anticipating the unknown aircraft's responses. Each blip on the radar moved predictably, confirming her analysis. She noticed a faint but crucial detail, a minor deviation in the blip's speed. "It's accelerating slightly," she said. Prepare for a possible intercept. Maintain steady course. Any sudden maneuvers could trigger a reaction we don't want. The co-pilot's eyes widened slightly. She's right, he muttered under his breath. The captain acknowledged silently, then over the intercom. Cabin crew, please remain seated. Passengers, remain calm. We have everything under control. Emma's parents gripped each other's hands, eyes flicking between their daughter and the cockpit monitors, silently amazed at her composure. Emma continued her observations, her voice steady and precise. If you climb slightly 10 more feet and reduce bank by half a degree, you'll create a subtle divergence. The aircraft will respond predictably, giving you a clear window for safe navigation. The captain followed her instructions. The plane shifted imperceptibly, almost too small for passengers to notice. Outside, the unknown aircraft mirrored their movements briefly before holding its course. Emma's predictions were accurate again. Her heart pounded, but she remained composed. The cabin was tense, filled with passengers unaware of the high-stakes adjustments occurring above the clouds. A small child in the row ahead pressed against her mother's shoulder, eyes wide with curiosity. Emma glanced briefly at the cabin, then returned her focus to the cockpit. Each second was critical. Each calculation mattered. Speed is steady, she said. Altitude adjustments are correct. Maintain this pattern, and you'll have a clear path for at least 2 more minutes. The captain nodded, impressed. You're calm under pressure, Emma. That's remarkable for someone your age. She shrugged slightly, her eyes still on the instruments. I've practiced this. It's about observation and predicting movement. Nothing else changes that. Suddenly, a sharper vibration ran through the fuselage. The unknown aircraft had adjusted its course slightly, testing their reactions again. Emma's pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. It's responding to our pattern. Do not panic or overcorrect. Keep trajectory steady. Minor adjustments only. The captain and co-pilot executed micro-movements precisely as she advised. The unknown blip shifted again, confirming her analysis. Their plane was maintaining safety without alerting the other aircraft unnecessarily. In the cabin, tension remained high. Flight attendants moved with subtle efficiency, calming passengers while keeping eyes on Emma. Her parents whispered quietly, barely daring to breathe. Emma, however, remained focused, translating radar patterns into actionable guidance. Each command, each adjustment required precision. Her knowledge, derived from simulations and countless hours of study, was guiding real people in real time thousands of feet above the Atlantic. Minutes passed in a tense rhythm. Emma's instructions were followed meticulously. Slight altitude corrections, minimal bank adjustments, and steady speed. The unknown aircraft's trajectory mirrored their responses, predictable yet still threatening. Emma noted every detail, predicting the next micro-adjustment. Her hands hovered over the console lightly, a symbolic gesture rather than interference. The pilots executed each maneuver with her guidance in mind. Finally, the radar indicated a subtle divergence. The unknown aircraft held a course away from theirs, maintaining a safe distance. The immediate threat, at least for now, had passed. The plane stabilized, the vibrations subsided, and the cabin's tension eased slightly. Emma exhaled quietly, allowing herself a brief moment of relief. The captain looked at her with a mixture of respect and astonishment. You did well. Extremely well, he said. Emma's parents embraced her silently, pride and relief mixing in their eyes. Around the cabin, murmurs of admiration circulated quietly, passengers beginning to sense the gravity of what had occurred, even if they didn't fully understand it. Emma remained composed, though her heart still raced. She had stepped into a situation far beyond her years and played a critical role in navigating it safely. Yet, as relief settled, Emma's mind remained alert. The unknown aircraft had not disappeared entirely. It had only retreated temporarily. The plane was safe, but vigilance was still required. She knew that the remainder of the flight would demand attention, careful monitoring, and readiness to act if needed. This was no ordinary journey. It was an extraordinary test of observation, knowledge, and composure. For Emma, the hours of preparation, study, and virtual training had transformed from a hobby into a life-saving skill. The 13-year-old girl who had napped innocently at the start of the flight was now a critical part of the cockpit team. And though the immediate danger had eased, she understood one undeniable truth. The skies were unpredictable, and she had just begun to navigate their hidden challenges. The plane's gentle hum now felt charged with tension, every vibration amplified by the uncertainty outside. Emma's eyes never left the instruments. She noted the faint, irregular flicker on one of the radar screens, a blip moving faster than it had before. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from recognition. The unknown aircraft was closing in again. This wasn't a random encounter or a routine interception. It was deliberate, calculated, and potentially dangerous. The co-pilot tightened his grip on the controls, eyes darting between instruments and radar. The captain's jaw was set, calm yet taut with concentration. Emma leaned slightly forward, analyzing the trajectory, predicting the unknown craft's next moves. She noticed subtle cues, the blip's speed changes, minor course adjustments, and a pattern consistent with evasive or probing behavior. She began calculating options altitude changes, small banking maneuvers, and speed adjustments that would maintain safety while testing the aircraft's response. Steady speed, Emma instructed softly, her voice calm but confident. Do not make abrupt course changes. Small, precise adjustments only. The aircraft is testing reactions, not attacking yet. The captain nodded, following her instructions with meticulous care. The plane shifted imperceptibly, almost too small for passengers to notice, but enough to influence the unknown aircraft's pattern. In the cabin, passengers were tense. Some held hands tightly, whispering prayers or reassurances. Flight attendants moved efficiently, keeping everyone seated and calm. Emma's parents sat rigidly, watching their daughter intently, awe and fear mingling in their expressions. They could see the seriousness of the situation, but didn't fully grasp the complexity Emma was navigating. She, however, understood every subtle motion and signal, translating them into precise, actionable guidance. The unknown aircraft accelerated slightly. The radar indicated a potential intercept path that could intersect their plane in under 2 minutes if no action was taken. Emma's fingers tapped lightly against her notebook, tracing trajectories she had memorized. Adjust altitude by 20 feet, right bank by 1 degree. Keep speed steady. That will create a safe buffer, she said. The captain executed the maneuvers, his trust in her insight growing with every accurate prediction. A low murmur of astonishment traveled through the cabin as passengers noticed the subtle but deliberate movements of the plane. Some glanced at Emma, recognizing her unusual calm amid chaos. She didn't meet their eyes, her attention entirely on the cockpit instruments. Each blip, each flicker of light, each subtle vibration told her a story she could interpret. She was seeing patterns invisible to others and guiding professionals in real time. The unknown aircraft veered slightly, mirroring the plane's micro-adjustments. Emma's eyes narrowed. It's probing, she said quietly. Testing our responses, calculating trajectory. Keep minor adjustments. Do not overreact. Seconds stretched, each one thick with tension. The plane's engines thrummed steadily, the fuselage vibrating slightly with each maneuver. The cabin remained calm outwardly, but the undercurrent of fear was palpable. A small child whimpered, and a mother whispered reassurances. Emma's parents exchanged anxious glances, But Emma remained composed. Her heart raced internally, but her voice and movements were steady. She was fully aware that every suggestion, every observation could mean the difference between safety and disaster. The unknown aircraft's approach was deliberate, fast, and unpredictable in its timing. She calculated options. If they maintained current speed and adjusted altitude slightly, the aircraft's trajectory could be disrupted without alerting passengers. "Prepare for potential evasive sequence," Emma said, her voice unwavering. "Micro adjustments only. Altitude up 5 feet. Bank left slightly. Follow my sequence precisely." The captain's hands moved across the controls with precision, executing each maneuver. The co-pilot mirrored the actions, trust in Emma's insight building with every correct prediction. Outside, the unknown aircraft shifted again, testing reactions with faster, sharper movements. Emma noted every change, predicting its next steps. "It's aggressive," she said, eyes narrowing. "But it's not committed yet. Follow the sequence. Minor banking, maintain speed. That will give us a window to maneuver safely." The pilots executed the adjustments flawlessly, the plane responding like an extension of Emma's own calculations. The cabin remained tense. Passengers whispered quietly, sensing the subtle gravity of the moment, even without understanding the technical details. Flight attendants moved efficiently, keeping eyes on Emma and occasionally glancing toward the cockpit. Emma's parents held each other tightly, watching their daughter with a mix of fear and amazement. Their child, so young, was guiding professionals through one of the most intense situations imaginable. The unknown aircraft closed in rapidly. Its radar blip indicated proximity, and every instinct Emma had honed in simulations kicked in. She guided the pilots through a series of subtle altitude adjustments, minimal banking, and minor speed shifts. "You're creating a buffer zone," she explained calmly. "The aircraft will respond predictably. Keep focus. Do not overcorrect." The captain nodded, fingers moving deftly, following her guidance to the letter. A moment of tense silence followed, then a slight divergence in the blip's trajectory. Emma's predictions were correct. The unknown aircraft had mirrored their micro-adjustments, maintaining a safe distance rather than committing to an intercept. The plane stabilized slightly, and the cabin's tension eased just a fraction. Passengers remained alert, some whispering to one another, but the immediate danger had passed for now. Emma exhaled quietly, her focus still razor-sharp. The unknown aircraft had not disappeared entirely. It remained nearby, a subtle reminder that vigilance was essential. She noted every movement, every shift in speed, and calculated the probability of another approach. Her knowledge, derived from simulations, observation, and careful reasoning, had guided the plane safely through the first phase of the encounter. The captain looked at her with a mixture of respect and astonishment. "You've been remarkably composed," he said. "Your observations were accurate and invaluable." "Thank you." Emma nodded quietly, her eyes still on the instruments. She understood that this was not the end, only a temporary reprieve. The skies were unpredictable, and she remained fully aware that the unknown aircraft could return at any moment. Her parents embraced her briefly, pride and relief evident in their eyes. Flight attendants exchanged subtle nods of acknowledgement. Emma, however, remained calm, fully focused on the cockpit. The plane was stable, the immediate threat had been managed, but the journey was far from ordinary. The Atlantic stretched below in endless clouds, a serene backdrop to the high-stakes drama unfolding above. Minutes passed in tense observation. Emma continued to guide micro-adjustments, ensuring the plane remained on a safe trajectory. Every vibration, every flicker of the radar, was catalogued in her mind. She had become an unexpected extension of the cockpit team, her calm reasoning a critical asset. The unknown aircraft had retreated temporarily, but Emma understood that the encounter could resume at any moment. Above the clouds, at 30,000 feet, Emma realized a profound truth. Courage, knowledge, and composure could emerge from the most unexpected places. A 13-year-old girl had guided trained pilots through a life-threatening scenario, using observation, logic, and insight. And though the immediate danger had passed, vigilance was essential. The skies were unpredictable, but Emma was ready to meet every challenge with the clarity and calm that had carried her this far. The plane finally steadied, gliding through the clouds with a hum that now felt almost ordinary, but Emma knew better. Every subtle vibration, every flicker of light on the instruments, could have indicated the slightest change in the unknown aircraft's behavior. Her hands rested lightly on the edge of the cockpit console, eyes scanning the monitors one last time before allowing herself a moment of relief. For the first time since takeoff, the immediate threat had passed, and the Atlantic stretched endlessly beneath them, calm and serene in stark contrast to the tension still lingering in the cabin. The captain exhaled slowly, shoulders relaxing slightly. His sharp, disciplined posture softened just enough to reveal admiration. "You were remarkable," he said quietly, almost to himself, before turning to Emma. "Your observations, your guidance. They kept this plane safe. Truly impressive." Emma felt a blush creep across her cheeks, but she stayed composed, aware that this was a moment of quiet recognition, not celebration. She had been part of something extraordinary, yet she understood that humility was part of responsibility. Her parents, sitting just behind the cockpit, leaned forward anxiously. "Emma, that was incredible," her mother whispered, her voice trembling with both pride and residual fear. Her father nodded vigorously, eyes glistening. "We've never seen anything like that. You kept everyone safe, everyone." Emma allowed herself a small smile, but returned her gaze to the instruments, ensuring stability. The plane had leveled completely, and for the first time in hours, she allowed herself to acknowledge what had just happened. Passengers, sensing the shift in atmosphere, began to relax. Some whispered to one another, still in awe of the situation they had experienced, but now relieved that the immediate danger had passed. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, checking on passengers, offering reassurances, and exchanging subtle nods that acknowledged Emma's crucial role. The cabin, once tense and anxious, now carried a subdued sense of gratitude and quiet amazement. The co-pilot exhaled, relaxing his grip on the controls. "She was right," he said to the captain, shaking his head slightly in disbelief. "All of it, the micro-adjustments, the trajectory predictions. Spot on. Couldn't have done it better ourselves." The captain nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Exceptional composure for someone so young," he replied. His eyes lingered on Emma for a moment, a silent acknowledgement that her calm, analytical mind had saved lives. Emma allowed herself to lean back slightly, the tension in her small body easing for the first time. She reflected on the past hours, the turbulence, the approaching aircraft, the subtle cues that had guided her observations. Her mind, still alert, began cataloging every detail, understanding that this experience would become a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life. Knowledge, observation, and calm reasoning had made the difference, and she had risen to the challenge. Her parents reached out, holding both of her hands. "We're so proud of you," her mother said softly, voice filled with emotion. "You were amazing." Her father squeezed her shoulder. "You've proven that courage isn't about age. It's about awareness, preparation, and calm under pressure." Emma nodded quietly, her eyes scanning the cockpit one last time. The pilots were now checking final systems, ensuring that the plane was fully stable for the remainder of the flight. The flight attendants moved back toward the galley, exchanging subtle smiles and whispered acknowledgments of Emma's role. Passengers glanced around, some still whispering about the unusual situation, others nervously adjusting their seats, realizing they had been part of a near-extraordinary event. Emma's calm presence had provided a silent reassurance to everyone aboard. Though most didn't fully understand her contribution, they felt its impact. Minutes passed, and the plane began its descent into calmer airspace. Emma's parents kept their hands lightly on hers, still marveling at what had occurred. The captain made a brief announcement over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have stabilized the flight. The immediate concern has passed, and we will be proceeding to our destination under normal conditions. Thank you for your patience." The announcement carried a tone of professionalism and relief, though those who had been aware of the details knew that extraordinary measures had been involved. Emma watched the radar one last time, noting the retreat of the unknown aircraft. It had maintained a safe distance, no longer posing a threat. The plane's stability allowed her to relax slightly, though her mind remained alert. Alertness had become second nature in this flight. She allowed herself a small smile, recognizing that her knowledge, preparation, and calm reasoning had played a critical role. She had acted decisively in a moment when experience alone might have faltered. Her parents whispered quietly to one another, glancing at Emma with wonder. "She's extraordinary," her father said. "A 13-year-old, and she handled that like a professional." Her mother nodded, voice soft but filled with pride. "Not just knowledge, composure. That's what saved everyone." Emma listened quietly, understanding their words, but keeping her gaze on the instruments. Gratitude and pride were natural, but vigilance remained a part of her instinct. The co-pilot turned slightly to the captain. "We should note this in our post-flight report. Exceptional handling from an unlikely source. She needs recognition." The captain agreed silently, eyes meeting Emma's one final time before returning attention to the instruments. Emma felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The acknowledgement was not necessary for her. What mattered was that the plane was safe, the passengers reassured, and the crew confident in their trajectory. The remainder of the flight passed without incident. Emma remained alert, occasionally checking the radar and instrument panels, ensuring stability. Passengers relaxed further, some dozing lightly, others speaking quietly with neighbors. Flight attendants resumed service, maintaining their calm professionalism, occasionally glancing at Emma with respect. Her parents held her hands briefly, allowing themselves to savor the relief. The plane had survived the encounter intact, and Emma had played an unanticipated yet crucial role. As the plane descended toward the airport, clouds gave way to city lights stretching in all directions. Emma leaned back slightly, finally allowing herself to exhale fully. The hum of the engines was no longer tense but steady, guiding them safely toward landing. The experience, though intense and surreal, had left her with a quiet confidence in her abilities. Knowledge, observation, and composure had triumphed over uncertainty, and she had risen to the occasion. Landing approached smoothly. The captain executed the descent with precision, guided by his crew and subtly influenced by Emma's calm insights throughout the flight. Passengers glanced out the windows at the city lights below, some whispering about the extraordinary journey they had just experienced. Emma's parents squeezed her hands, silently communicating pride, relief, and love. The flight, which had begun as a routine journey, had transformed into a life-defining experience for everyone aboard, especially for a young girl who had stepped forward when her awareness was most needed. As the wheels touched the runway, the plane shuddered slightly, a familiar vibration of landing, and then steadied. Applause broke out spontaneously in the cabin, passengers relieved and amazed at the safe arrival. Emma smiled faintly, glancing around the cabin. It was over, and she had helped ensure it ended safely. The plane taxied to the gate, engines humming steadily, the crew moving efficiently, and passengers beginning to collect their belongings. Emma's journey had transformed into a story of courage, calm, and knowledge in the skies. The plane came to a smooth stop at the gate, engines gradually winding down, and the cabin lights brightened to signal the end of the flight. Passengers began gathering their belongings, some still whispering in disbelief about the tense hours they had endured above the Atlantic. The air was heavy with relief, but also a quiet awe. Everyone had been part of something extraordinary, though only a few understood the full scope of what had occurred. Emma remained seated for a moment, glancing at the cockpit door. Her hands, small and slightly clammy, rested on her notebook. The co-pilot gave her a small, respectful nod, and the captain stepped out, meeting her eyes. "Emma, may I have a word?" he asked gently. She rose and approached the cockpit, parents at her side, and followed him into the small space at the front of the plane. "Your observations were precise," the captain began, his tone calm yet sincere. "The micro-adjustments you suggested, the analysis of the aircraft's behavior. It was exceptional. I've been flying for decades, and I've never seen such composure and accuracy in someone so young. You helped us navigate a potentially dangerous situation, and your input saved lives." Emma's parents looked on, pride shining in their eyes, while she remained composed, though her heart raced slightly. Emma spoke softly. "I only noticed what I saw on the radar and instruments. I've studied these patterns in simulations. That's all." The captain smiled faintly. "It's more than that. It's calm under pressure, the ability to think critically, and the courage to step forward when needed. Those qualities are rare at any age, but in you, they were remarkable." Emma nodded quietly, her mind replaying the moments above the clouds of tension, the precise calculations, and the unwavering focus. Outside the cockpit, passengers began disembarking, some turning back to glance toward the front of the plane. Whispers of admiration traveled quietly among the crowd, and a few flight attendants exchanged discreet smiles. Emma's presence had been a quiet anchor for the cabin, though most passengers were unaware of the exact role she had played. Yet her calm had influenced everyone, offering a subtle reassurance that resonated through the cabin. The airline staff, alerted to the extraordinary events, began to prepare for formal recognition. A supervisor stepped toward the cockpit, clipboard in hand, and spoke with the captain briefly. Minutes later, a small ceremony was arranged at the gate. Emma, escorted by her parents, was formally acknowledged for her courage, composure, and knowledge in an unprecedented situation. Flight attendants and crew members gathered around, offering congratulations, while passengers watched with quiet amazement. "Emma," the airline spokesperson began, voice amplified slightly, "today, you demonstrated remarkable courage, insight, and composure. Your actions helped the flight crew safely navigate a potentially dangerous situation, ensuring the safety of everyone aboard. We are honored to recognize your extraordinary contribution." The words hung in the air, met with polite applause from passengers, some standing to offer genuine acknowledgement. Emma's parents embraced her briefly, pride and relief evident in their expressions. Her father whispered softly, "You've done something incredible. We're so proud of you." Her mother nodded, holding her close. Emma smiled faintly, her eyes bright with satisfaction, but she remained composed. She had acted out of observation, analysis, and a sense of responsibility, not for recognition, but because it was necessary. The captain stepped forward again. "I've been flying for over 30 years, he said, voice calm but filled with respect. "And I can tell you this, rarely do we encounter someone who can remain this calm, think this clearly, and provide such accurate guidance under pressure. Emma, you've proven that courage and knowledge know no age. You are an inspiration." Emma felt a mixture of pride and humility. She had risen to the occasion, but she knew there was always more to learn, always another scenario to prepare for. Journalists waiting at the gate began recording statements. Emma, shy yet composed, answered questions briefly, how she had noticed subtle patterns, why she remained calm, and what it had felt like to step forward. Her words were precise, thoughtful, and insightful. She emphasized observation, preparation, and composure lessons she had learned from countless hours studying aviation, simulations, and theoretical exercises. The adults around her marveled at her clarity and poise. Passengers slowly disembarked, shaking their heads in amazement. Some spoke quietly to Emma and her parents, expressing gratitude and admiration. "I was terrified," one man said, "but seeing her calm, it made all the difference." A woman added, "It's incredible to think that a 13-year-old helped guide the crew. Truly remarkable." Emma nodded politely, absorbing the admiration without letting it distract from the gravity of what had happened. In the following days, the story spread. News outlets highlighted Emma's courage and intelligence, portraying her as an inspiring figure who had helped maintain the safety of an entire flight. Interviews, photographs, and first-hand accounts focused on her calm demeanor, analytical mind, and unwavering focus during a potentially dangerous situation. Emma remained humble, emphasizing preparation, observation, and the importance of staying calm under pressure. The airline awarded her a formal recognition certificate, accompanied by a small ceremony at the company headquarters. The captain and co-pilot personally praised her, highlighting the precision of her guidance and the courage she had displayed. Emma's parents were invited, witnessing their daughter being celebrated, not just for her knowledge, but for her courage, composure, and critical thinking. The young girl who had once napped innocently on a transatlantic flight had become a symbol of intelligence, calm, and bravery. Reflecting afterward, Emma realized how ordinary the flight had seemed at first. A typical journey, a casual nap, a routine day, yet it had transformed into an extraordinary moment that tested her focus, courage, and knowledge. She had learned firsthand the power of observation, preparation, and the ability to remain calm in high-pressure situations. Her actions had proven that age is not a barrier to making a difference when knowledge and composure are applied effectively. Her parents, still in awe, spoke often about the journey, emphasizing to friends and family how their daughter had risen to an unexpected challenge with wisdom beyond her years. Emma, meanwhile, quietly continued her studies, simulations, and research into aviation and emergency response. She understood that this was only one event in a long journey of learning, growth, and potential challenges ahead. Passengers and crew alike remembered her calm presence and analytical guidance. Even those unaware of the exact details could sense the reassurance she had provided. The story became a lesson in courage, preparation, and focus, demonstrating that anyone regardless of age can step forward when circumstances demand it. Emma had transformed from a quiet, curious 13-year-old into a figure of courage, composure, and inspiration, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed her extraordinary actions. As the sun set over the city below, Emma and her parents exited the airport, the hum of the city blending with the quiet satisfaction of a mission accomplished. She looked back at the plane one last time, feeling a deep sense of pride, humility, and readiness for whatever challenges might come next. Knowledge, observation, and calm under pressure had guided her through the skies, and she knew that these lessons would remain with her forever. The flight, which began as a simple journey, had become a life-defining event, a testament to courage, preparation, and the remarkable capabilities of the human mind, no matter the age. Emma's story, though extraordinary, was a reminder that composure, intelligence, and bravery can emerge from the most unexpected places, and that one person, even a young girl, can make a world of difference when they rise to the occasion.